Well, welcome to the bonus module of practical preaching. Again, my hope and prayer is that you have found this course helpful, that you have found some practical things that you can apply to your preaching to help become a better communicator of the gospel and a clearer communicator of the gospel. In this bonus episode, we don't want to focus so much on preaching, but the Sunday morning experience that can help people focus better while preaching. And so what we want to do is give you a few things that you can do to create more engagement on Sunday mornings, which will translate to people focusing more and being more excited and bought in during the message time, during the time that you're actually preaching. And so we want to give you 4 things that maybe you don't currently do, or things that might be a little bit different than what you're used to, but we have found helps create an environment of excitement and engagement on a Sunday morning, which again translates to people focusing more and being more ready to take in what you're going to teach from the pulpit. And so here we go. Here's the first thing that we do at New City Church we would highly recommend to you, and that's closing the door of your auditorium until closely to when the service begins. Now, this kind of depends on the size of the space that you're in, and kind of if you're able to close the door, what it looks like. But for us at New City Church, what we do is we actually keep the auditorium door closed so nobody can come into our auditorium or your sanctuary, whatever you may call it, until 5 minutes before the service starts. And this does a couple of things for us. Number one, it keeps people from being so separated. And this is maybe even more important if you're a smaller church or if you're a church planter and you don't have a ton of people coming. What can often happen is you can have people hanging out in the parking lot and then hanging out in the lobby and then some people hanging out in the auditorium or the sanctuary. And it can feel like there's not much going on, like there's not much energy. But if you close the auditorium until 5 minutes before your service starts, it kind of forces people to gather together to talk, and as people are walking in, they actually see and feel that something is going on. And so for us, we keep the doors closed 5 minutes before service. Number one, because it kind of gives more energy and excitement in the lobby before the service. But also, number two, because there's momentum and movement. So when we open the doors and everyone's kind of walking in together at the same time, it makes it seem like something exciting is about to happen. Again, it creates more energy, creates more excitement, and as a side note, it helps people actually sit together, right? Because if you're walking into the auditorium and there's already people sitting in different spots, the human nature tendency is to always leave at least one chair or maybe more between you and the next person. But if you're in the lobby and you're talking and everyone's talking together and you open the door and everyone mostly has to come in at the same time, they're probably more likely to sit together. And so it helps you avoid some of those gaps in your space, which also can kind of reduce the energy in your space if everybody is sitting far apart from each other. So we recommend just trying this, man. Just trying this. Close your doors, whether it's 10, 5 minutes, however it works for you before the service starts to create energy and synergy to get people excited before the service even begins. So that's the first thing you do. Keep your doors closed until briefly before your service. Here's another thing that we do at New City Church that's a little different, but we have found to be extremely effective, and that's this, that we don't put the main text Bible verses on our screens. In other words, if we have a main text, so if we're going through a biblical book, for example, that main text for that day won't be put on the screens. If we're going through maybe a more topical series, we'll still try to have kind of anchor it in one main text, and that main text will not be shown on the screens. Now, maybe supporting verses and things like that will be, but the main text won't be. Instead, what we do is we kind of, on our screens, what happens when we get to the passage that we're teaching from that day is it says the passage and the page number. Now again, this a little bit depends on the space that you are in, but we have Bibles in all of our chairs, and so when they see the page number, they can flip to that Bible and they can actually read it. And it's just, I just got to tell you, it's actually quite cool and quite different in our culture today when we're actually reading the text and everybody is actually reading the Bible along with you. Now, it doesn't have to be a physical Bible. It could be an app as well. Either way is fine. But what this does is instead of allowing people just to kind of sit passively and listen, it engages them more, it gives them something to do, and it allows them to follow along as you're reading. And here's why this is also really fascinating and really awesome as well, is that in our culture today, again, increasingly, more people are biblically illiterate, and if you have people coming in who have never opened the Bible or read the Bible in their lives, it's kind of neat because, number one, it gets them to put the Bible in their hands for maybe the first time. It kind of takes the intimidation factor out of it, but it also shows people that you're teaching from the Bible. Because here's the thing, even if you say we're going to be reading from Matthew or Mark or whatever the biblical book is that day, think of it this way. If you're not a Christian and you have no familiarity with the Bible at all, just because you hear someone says they're preaching from the book of Mark, Well, you might be thinking, who's Mark and what is that book? And may not actually understand that you're teaching from the Bible itself. And so when you, in some ways, kind of force people to open the Word for themselves, they actually know that you're teaching from the Bible. And it's kind of funny. I get comments quite often around New City Church that one of the things people love about our church is that we preach from the Bible. Now, I mean, we do preach from the Bible, but again, most churches also preach from the Bible, hopefully. I think one of the main reasons people say that is because we force them to get into the biblical text every week with us. And so if you take the main text off the screens and you force people, encourage people to open the Word for themselves, they are able to read it, they are able to follow along, and sometimes, when you have the verses on the screens and you want to reference something back that you read previously, well, it's not on the screen, so people can't go back and look at it. And so again, this kind of depends on your space. If you're able to buy Bibles and have them in all your chairs, that kind of depends whether or not you can do this. But that's a thing that we do here at New City Church that creates engagement, not just for everybody else, but particularly during the sermon, because it gives people something to do and to follow along. So we would highly recommend doing something different and trying not to put your main text on your screens. Instead, put the page number, allow people to easily find it, and let them read along with you. Here's another thing that we do that's a little bit different and maybe kind of counterintuitive, but also helps people have more energy and excitement on a Sunday morning, is that we drop chairs. Now, what we mean by we drop chairs is that we actually add chairs as people come in. Now, again, this also has to do with the space that you're in. If you're in a space that you can actually pick up chairs and drop them, makes a difference. In our case, we actually can stack our chairs and put them down. And so what we do is we put out a little bit less the number of chairs than the number of people that we anticipate coming. And what this does is a couple of things. Number one, it forces people to sit together because they don't have all these other options to kind of spread out, which creates more energy. And it kind of allows people, again, to sit more up front, because what does everyone do when they walk in? They sit in the back. But if you don't have a ton of chairs in the back, it kind of, again, forces people to sit more up front, more together. And then as people come in, we add a row or two or three. Just kind of depends, again, on your space and what that looks like. We add chairs as people come in, which also creates excitement. It creates this kind of sense of, oh, wow, there's people here. There's something going on. And so when you don't have all the available chairs for people to sit in the beginning, it forces people to sit closer together, to talk to each other, creates more energy, and it creates excitement when people see all those chairs being dropped as people are coming in. Now, this is a little different if you can't. If you're in a space that you can't drop chairs, we did this for a number of reasons. One, to create energy. Two, to make people sit together, which also creates more energy. And also because roping off chairs or putting pieces of paper on chairs that says reserved to a new person can come across as difficult or as uninviting. And so whether that's pipe and draping chairs or whatever that looks like for you, if you're not in a space where you can actually put chairs down and pick them up, I would highly recommend figuring out what that looks like for you, actually putting out less chairs than the number of people you anticipate coming, and adding them as those chairs fill up, because having people sit closer together, more up front, creates much more energy and excitement during worship and listening during preaching. People are more likely to laugh and more likely to engage if they're close to other people, as opposed to sitting far apart. And dropping chairs as people come in makes that possible. And here's the fourth one. Now, this one is not so counterintuitive, but it's something that we see particularly church plants and smaller churches don't do, which is a big deal and helps set the tone for the rest of the Sunday. And that is having people serve in your parking lot. And here's what I mean. It may not seem like, if you're a smaller church, that you need people helping to park and direct cars as they're coming in. And that may be true. You may not need it in that regard. But I would argue you need it in another regard, because you want people as they're coming in to know that you expected them and that you were anticipating them coming, particularly if people are new. And having people in the parking lot to help guide and direct and welcome people in shows from the very beginning, as soon as they get on your lot or your campus, that you were ready for them. So it may not seem like you need parkers. It may not seem like, oh, people can find out where they need to go by themselves. That may be true. But having people in the parking lot sets the tone from the beginning that we're excited, that we're anticipating for you to be here, and we want to welcome you as soon as you drive onto our space. And so again, I would recommend, even if you feel like you don't need it, make it a priority to have one or two or three, depending on what your parking lot looks like, people in the parking lot directing, guiding, and welcoming traffic as they come in, so it sets the tone right away that it's going to be a great Sunday, that we're looking forward to what's going to happen, and we anticipated that you would be here. So those are 4 things that you can do that don't have to do with preaching, but can help you create an environment of engagement and excitement so people are more likely to listen to your preaching. Again, close your doors, in our case 5 minutes, keep them closed to the auditorium 5 minutes until before your service starts, then open it so everybody's kind of walking in at the same time, creating energy and momentum that way. Take your main text Bible verses off the screens. Just put the text and the page number if you have Bible so people can follow along. Number 3, drop chairs. Don't put out more chairs than you need. Actually put out a little bit less so people have to sit together, and it creates excitement as people are sitting in close proximity to each other. Number 4, have people in the parking lot, even if you don't feel like you need it, because that will create an environment of acceptance and excitement from the moment people drive on to your lot. So those are some things that you can do to create more energy on a Sunday morning. Try those things out, and you might even see a little difference in how people respond to your preaching because of the environment that you have created on a Sunday morning.